Welcome to the My Stogie Mr. Gogi podcast with your hosts, Don Gonzalez
and Mark Connolly,
where we talk about everything from the sublime
to the ridiculous.
Welcome back to the My Stogie Mr. Gogi podcast. Tonight we have a guest co-host who's been on the podcast before, my son, Kevin Gonzalez, sitting in for Mark. Mark's getting ready for his dad to come in for Father's Day and celebrating his 90th birthday. Kevin, thanks for being able to step up, be next man up. As always, we start with what you smoking and what you drinking. What you got, Kev?
So I'm smoking a Drew Estate Fat Bottom Betty. It's probably my all-time favorite cigar. It's part of their Deadwood lineup. I can't recall offhand what the wrapper is. I do know it's considered like a medium. This particular one would be, I don't know, I'd consider this a Gordo size. It's probably 6 inches. It's probably got, I don't know, about a 52 gauge on it, but it's considered a medium, like full-bodied cigar. It's not one of their, it's part of a line that's heavily infused, but this one is supposedly not infused. But I've smoked enough of them, I'd be willing to bet there's some kind of infusion going on. But the flavor profiles are definitely woodsy, leathery, maybe a hint of coffee, but definitely a level of sweetness to it. Not much of a drinker. I did consider having an actual beverage this evening, but I don't have anything that would pair well with those alcoholic-wise. And Monday's a traditional Chick-fil-A night for us, so I am pairing it with a Chick-fil-A lemonade.
All right. The regular lemonade?
Yeah, oh yeah. Full diabetic version.
Okay. And when you say Deadwood, you're talking about the HBO TV series?
No. The Drew Estate cigar line. It's one of their cigar lines. It's called Deadwood. It's
And so
Deadwood Cove.
they didn't take that from the TV show?
I don't know. That's actually an interesting question. I don't know. Now I'm gonna have to go look that up.
All right. I
See
just asked back in the day, your mother and I had a tradition on Sunday nights to watch The Sopranos, and we would smoke cigars afterwards. And CAO, the old CAO, had a line called The Sopranos. So anyway.
Yeah, they've got this one. They've got Sweet Jane. A Girl with No Name is another one of the cigars they have, and a couple others whose names I just can't come up with off the top of my head.
All right. No problem. All right. Well, I'm smoking an Arturo Fuente Don Carlos number 4. It's a Vitola Corona, 5 1/4 by 45. So it's a smaller stick with a smaller ring gauge. It's got the Cameroon wrapper that I love so much, and it's got a different type of Dominican Republic filler and binder. It's a medium strength. Flavors are very similar to the other Fuente line: cedar, toasted almonds, baking spices, coffee, cocoa, subtle sweetness that you get out of the Cameroon wrapper. And on the last third of the cigar, some people pick up hints of leather. So it's apparently a slow smoking cigar, so we'll see how that works for me. It's definitely well constructed. What I'm drinking tonight is a Glenmorangie Scotch. It's the Triple Cask Reserve. This is a Highland single malt Scotch whiskey, and Highland means it's the region that it comes from. The reason it's called a triple cask is because it's been aged in 3 different casks: an ex-bourbon cask, a new charred oak cask, and then finished out in rye whiskey cask. The flavor profile for this is honey, pear, orange zest, which the Glenmorangie is known for, vanilla cream, cinnamon, which I've been able to pick up in the beverage, nutmeg, clove, and toasted oak. It's the addition of the rye whiskey cask that gives the Triple Cask Reserve the more spicier taste than the original Glenmorangie. And I actually, one of the things that I also like about this particular bottle is that 2 years ago, Glenmorangie decided to do away with their 10-year line, which was my favorite, the original, and continue to age it for 12 years. And they said they weren't going to increase the price, but they did. I don't like the 12-year-old. It's too smooth. It doesn't go well with cigars. Cigars always overwhelm it. But this drink, I think, has the original 10-year-old recipe. It holds up well to the cigar. and it's well priced. It comes in at about $35 for 750 milliliter, which is where I want to be if this is just a normal thing I want to drink when we're smoking cigars on a Tuesday, or in this case, as we're filming and recording the podcast. So that's what I'm drinking, and that's what I'm smoking. We're going to try to do 2 mini segments, but it may turn into one large segment, just depending on how the conversation goes. And I just got to say, I asked Kevin literally at the last minute if he'd be willing to do this. So again, thanks, Kev, for your willingness to pop in. So let me frame this. The first segment that we're going to do is we're going to discuss the movie Disclosure Day, which is the new movie from Steven Spielberg that opened last Thursday and is the #1 movie in the country right now. If you don't know, it's a movie about aliens. And if you've not seen the film, there are going to be plenty of spoilers in our discussion. So this would be a time for you to say goodbye and come back later on. So Kevin and I went to go see the movie. Was it Thursday or was it Friday?
Friday.
Went to go see it Friday. And we spent some time talking about the movie afterwards. And then later on, I think it started with you getting a text message from one of your buddies criticizing the film. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that text message was about, and then we'll kind of use that as a launching point for further discussion.
So a lot of the guys at church we're all on a group me page together, and I like to call him one of our local apologists, posted that he was kind of hesitant to see the film because he had seen this video, and it was a YouTube video. It was like 22 minutes long. This guy I'm not familiar with, definitely presenting as Catholic, got a lot of Catholic artwork and stuff in the background behind him. And I sat through maybe half the video. When I eventually got around to watching it, I'd already gone into the movie hearing some things about it from the religion aspect of the film, the religious components that are in it. And so I didn't want to hear
So let's stop.
anything.
Why don't we do this,
Yeah.
Kev? Why don't you do kind of a recap of the movie and what goes on in the movie, kind of a quick summary of the film, and then we can circle back, talk a little bit about what that video said, and then what that led to some of our discussions about whether or not the film is anti-religious or anti-Christian.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to give a quick synopsis of the film, it's basically the government's been covering up for the better part of 4 decades that we are indeed not alone. Aliens are real, and there's this guise of trying to protect humanity involved. And there's a group within this government agency that's supposed to be supposedly protecting humanity that disagrees and wants the world to know what's really going on. And so they set out to do that. And somehow, in the scheme of this, there's 2 characters that play a very pivotal role to the story. And eventually, there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that happen in between. There's a woman that was studying to be a nun who backed out of that for her reasons of doubt. There's her boyfriend, who is one of the defectors of said company, the said government agency, deflectors. Yeah. And just how everything just kind of unfolds around that. And so you get the introduction of religion really from her, this Jane, I think is the character's name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole religious aspect kind of centers around Jane. And then Jane gets involved in this uncovering, this reveal, if you will, and then also on the agency side to try to silence this group. And so she's kind of in a moral dilemma of sorts, if you will, on what her role needs to be.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Jane character, and then we'll touch on what some of the controversy has been. So a lot of the controversy surrounds her, but then some of it is related to just the way that Spielberg approaches the film in terms of the aliens and all of that. So at one point when these 2 characters are on the run, they wind up taking refuge in a monastery, which interestingly enough is called St. Clair. And St. Clair is the patron saint of television. The story that they tell in the movie, I've not heard that version of it before. They say that she was somewhere where she was not able to attend the Christmas Vigil Mass and she bilocated. What I've heard is a black box appeared in her cell or wherever she was and she was able to see the mass through that. I don't know which story is the real story, but nevertheless, she's the patroness of television. The sisters at EWTN have told that story before, so I was somewhat familiar with that. Anyway, not to digress too much. She goes back, she's welcome. We find out that she had been a novice. The term that they use in the movie is novitiate, I think is what they say, but she was in discernment to become a nun. She's encountered by the mother of the order and very well welcomed. And then there's another scene where she's having interaction with her now boyfriend, where she talks about her crisis of faith. So that's kind of the first part. So we talked about this after we saw the movie over lunch. It's like, I didn't see anything in that exchange that came across as being anti-religious. So your memory is probably better than mine. And I think this happens later on. So this first scene, I think, is pretty normal. People discern in and out of religious life all the time. That's why they have a period of discernment. And she actually, I think she said she lost her vocation, which properly understood is she lost that call, or she didn't feel called to that way of life. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So as later on in one of the other scenes, her boyfriend, whose name escapes me right now. You remember what his name was?
No, I
Yeah,
don't.
it doesn't matter. Anyway, the other character who worked for the non-government agency and is the primary person they're trying to find. This whole time, probably 30 minutes into the movie, he hasn't told her why they're chasing him. And so finally he does. And this leads to what I would describe as another crisis of faith for her, because she essentially says, well, a couple of things happen. She's got the moral dilemma that you kind of alluded to. It's like, who are you, talking to her boyfriend, who are you to share this information with the world? You're going to change people's lives in a way that they maybe don't want. And she seems to imply that if people know that there's the existence of other beings, that somehow or another will undermine their belief in God. And so I think that's the other thing that critics talk about. So is that what the guy in the video mostly talked about?
Uh, he hit on a lot of stuff. He did talk about that, but he went into the depth across the movie. Like I said, I only watched half of it, but we got up to the point where they're in that farmhouse hiding, and the agency shows up for her, and all the little things that just happen in that quick little scene.
Well, I mean, there's a major thing that happens before that with the bad guy played by, what's his name? Colin.
Is that Colin Firth? Is that who that
Yeah,
is?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting casting because he's normally the good guy. I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah, for sure.
So here's one of the things that they allude to. So he has this alien device, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of rectangular, but with like pointed
It,
edges
it
to it.
if you picture a 6-inch long metal Twix bar, you'll be close.
Okay. So he grabs a hold of that and he's connected to all these monitoring devices because apparently this alien tech can really wear people out. And it actually, anybody else that was touching it had to use a glove. And anyway, he was able to use that in order to enter the mind of the girl. And while he's doing that exchange, you want to describe that exchange or you want me to do it?
No, you can.
Okay. And I don't remember what gave him the ability to do that, how he was able to locate her and make that connection.
They set a monitor in front of you. They give you the image of the person, and they fed you as much information about that person as they can. And it's almost like using the Force in Star Wars. It's just a way for you to hyper focus on an individual and be able to make that other sense connection to them.
Yeah. So he makes a mental connection with her and she sees him physically sitting in a chair in front of him. When he's not really there, he's in her head. And he's trying to convince her to stop the boyfriend. In the process of him being inside of her head, she has her crucifix that she's been wearing the whole time. She's holding it in her hand. The first thing she does is she squeezes it to a point where she makes herself bleed, and she actually disrupts the connection the first time. He's able to make the reconnection, stronger will this time, draining himself. She continues to use the crucifix. I interpret that as her just trying to break the connection. And so some writers have said a couple of things about this scene. One is they try to make it out to be some sort of like demonic possession. Secondly, that I don't know if the assertion is that this is some sort of false stigmata. And I didn't even pick up on that when I watched the movie. I was reading there's a real good review of the movie by Deacon Steven, who does the decentfilms.com, and he writes on the Substack, and he used to do all the movie reviews for EWTN. So he's solid. He's got a theology degree. He's an ordained deacon, and he's a very prolific writer. His stuff's pretty solid. So it was interesting to read his review, both from the standpoint of like the Catholic perspective as well as just as a movie. So, you want to say anything about that?
Well, yeah. So like the video that was shared with our group, that guy went hardcore into that particular scene. Like he was flat out calling it the stigmata and things like that. But what I liked about Deacon Stevens' review on it, he was hesitant to even walk that line. You know, he addressed it very briefly. The term he used was quasi stigmatic, and I much I like his take on it. I think that if you go into this film looking for this supposed attack on religion or all these undertones or thematic elements, no matter which side of the fence you fall on, I think you're going to find them, whether they're really there or not. Yes, I don't have a better word for possession. I mean, that's basically what's going on here. But it's not true possession by any stretch. He's in, and I guess
Well,
it is because he has control. With enough hold, he can control the person, which we see. And
I really
then,
kind of thought of it as like the Vulcan mind meld. That's the way I interpreted it
yeah,
from a
it's more
sci-fi
like,
standpoint.
yeah, it's more like that. Just a little bit more power than that.
Or like your Jedi reference as well, the whole notion of what they call the Jedi mind tricks
Right.
in the New Hope. I don't know what the technical term is for that Jedi power.
Yeah, it's definitely more like that. I don't I don't like the idea of calling it possession from a religious standpoint because with true possession, there on some level there has to be a yes by the individual that ends up being possessed. In this particular situation, you just don't have that. That person doesn't have a choice. There's not a yes or no. They haven't done anything to warrant this. Their free will is just quite literally being taken from them. A form of assault, sure, but I don't like calling it a possession. And then when you talk about the stigmata thing, I was with you. I saw it as like a scream to God. You have this person who has already had one doubt on one platform or one scenario with her vocation. Now she finds out aliens are real, so now it's even dug her deeper in the well. When she comes out of the bathroom, which is where she is when the assault originally occurs, she's walking out to the kitchen, sees the guy sitting in a chair, and what I don't know is if she rips her crucifix off herself or if that's his initial attack. That was the one
I
thing that
feel like
left me kind of confused.
I feel like she did it on her own.
Yeah.
It
Um,
almost felt like she took it off because she had, again, it's my interpretation, that was going to be her weapon somehow or another. I think she had the intuition that she
that's
was going
that's
to need her crucifix.
that was my initial response too. I think
It's
if anything, I think it was like, okay, well now I got more doubt because I'm pretty sure this dude's not sitting here, and I'm also pretty sure I'm about to need my Lord. So let me have him in a position where, because she's already felt the control. So I think you're right. She already knows that they're capable of doing something that she can't fully fathom. And so I do. I think she goes for the only thing she can. And I think she's reaching out to her Lord, both physically and mentally. It didn't feel like a stigmata situation. It just felt like I have an idea. Let's cause myself pain and see if that gets him out of my head, because that's clearly where he's at. And it works. She's just not able to cause herself enough pain to keep him out.
Yeah, and I'm with you. To me, that's an act of faith. The reaching for the crucifix as a sacramental and acknowledging the power of Christ. That's the way I interpret it. I didn't interpret it to be something that was sacrilegious or intended to be anti-Catholic.
Mm-mm.
At least
No,
that's my take on it.
no, that's my take too on a lot of a lot of this stuff, because throughout the film, with I think there's two scenarios, two situations where even then it doesn't feel like an attack on religion. It just feels like that doesn't make any sense and that's stupid. And even if it was meant to be an attack on religion, you're just like, if you know anything about Christianity, you're like, that's still, it's just stupid.
So,
Um, uh,
so let's cover a couple of other scenes, and then we'll talk about the film in more general terms, and then some takeaways about what this sort of art, could have been a book, what it does to our belief, and what it says about, how we go about interacting with art and our faith. So after Jane has learned that the aliens exist. She's seen a number of videos. Uh, they try to hide her away back at the monastery to keep her safe. And she has a conversation, and she does it in hypothetical terms with the mother of the order, asking her what would happen if we weren't the only creatures in the universe. Wouldn't that undermine the belief in God? And the Mother Superior gives what I call a drop mic moment. Like, she says, of course, there's the possibility of other beings. To think otherwise would put limitations on the extraordinary power of God, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And I thought that was a beautiful answer.
yeah, I love that answer, because no, that's basically what she said. She's basically telling her, like, look, even if, yeah, if there's other species out there, other intelligent life out there, who do you think made them?
Yeah. So we're going to circle back and talk a little bit more about that at the conclusion of just going through the scenes. I know that there was one scene in particular that I think probably bothered both of us. You fast forward to the third act of the film, and it starts to become obvious in a very public way that these other two characters that are off screen, one of them played by Emily Blunt, who is phenomenal in this film in terms of the range of emotion that she displayed. I've read online that some people think this is an Academy Award nomination worthy performance. She was great.
Absolutely.
It becomes obvious that she has empathic abilities. She can tell people things about their lives and whatnot. And as we're getting close to the crescendo of the film, she's in front of a bunch of the people who are part of, I'm going to call it the rebellion, the people that are trying to get the message out there that aliens exist. And one of them, I can't remember if it's a genuflection or if it's a full kneel down,
She
and then
genuflected.
and does the sign of the cross. And Emily Blunt's character immediately rejects it. So I know that scene bothered you. Tell me about what you felt when you saw that scene, and what you thought it meant.
It it just it bothered me because there's an insinuation there from this side character that she views our main girl here as a deity. And what I didn't like about it, besides that, it's one of the things that I thought was just stupid ultimately, because it doesn't make sense. Because if I wish I had remembered the characters' names better. If Emily Blunt's character really was supposed to be brought forth as a deity level, that would have been made more clear. But nothing in this film was about that. In fact, if anything, if they were going to take any kind of crazy arc with it, she was a vessel. The whole idea is she's a messenger. And so therefore, if anything, she's a vessel. So if you want to compare her to anybody from a scripture standpoint, it would have been Mary. Because if the idea is, if the premise we're going to bring to the table is, well, the movie wants to treat these aliens like they're deities. Okay, well, this woman's a vessel for them. Therefore, she's not God on any
Yeah,
level.
and I don't think that Spielberg is trying to make the aliens out to be deities. That's one of the arguments that's out
No,
there. I want to say something about this minor character that genuflects Emily Blunt's character. To me, if we're looking at this critically, and I'm being very charitable towards Spielberg, I don't know what's in his mind, but the way I read that scene, and I'm a little bit disappointed that Deacon Stephen didn't talk more about that scene in particular. But this is how I interpreted that particular scene, because we see this in everyday life. That is a person whose spirituality as a Catholic is very superficial to the point that it's almost superstitious. And, I think we've probably both encountered people that treat their sacramentals like there's some sort of good luck charms. And somebody that isn't really rooted in their faith properly, I think would have that sort of reaction. And I think that that's what is being demonstrated in that scene. At least that's the way I looked at it.
I
What do you think?
I can dig that, and I can dig that because of Emily's response to that, where she's like, "I'm nobody's God," and she bounces. She's like, "You can chill here. I'm gonna go over here." So I like that, and
Yeah,
and
so the
I'm
thought that go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because the way I looked at this, what Spielberg put out, I didn't see this. I know we're gonna talk about this in more depth here in a minute or so, but I didn't see this attack on the religion. In fact, I thought in many ways he was quite charitable to faith based, to Christians and to Catholics in particular. Um, and I can see how you could go the other way, but that's just where I was at.
So, while we were talking about this, I had this image in my head from the movie The Avengers where Loki shows up and he demands that the people kneel to him claiming to be what essentially is a false god. That's the contrast there. Like, Emily Blunt's character didn't do that. She rejected it, whereas Loki was trying to get them to bow to him.
Yeah, she had a very John the Baptist response.
That's I like that. I like that. So the final scene that I want to talk about, and then we'll talk about the film more holistically about themes and how we should approach this from a Christian Catholic perspective, is near the very end of the film. They trot out this ancient, bigger alien who for a moment I thought was going to be E.T. And that's kind of what I was hoping for, but that's the geek in me. And he whispers supposedly words of wisdom to both Emily Blunt's character, and the other guy has the ability to interpret tongues, if you will, because he can understand the language of the aliens. And the message is simply listen. And the criticism from people is that character and the aliens in whole are being lifted up as the saviors of the world. And I don't know about you. Well, will you tell me how you viewed that, and then I'll share my thoughts about it.
I didn't view it that way at all. I question their motivations more than anything after watching the movie.
The motivation of the aliens?
Yeah, the motivation of the aliens. You've been you've been abused for here's how big of a nerd I am. All right, this is where my brain goes. First off, you crash landed here not once, but apparently three, four, half a dozen times. You're a superior being to us in regards of intellect and technology. Why are you still crashing after 4 decades? Quit coming to our planet till you get your S together. Like, stop this. This is crazy. And then only you crashing, the humans are abusing you, yet somehow you're concerned about our well-being in the long term. So you're going to show up and teach us empathy and to listen to one another. Why? Like their motivations didn't make any sense to me. But we got the big dude here. I didn't make heads or tails of it. I think the big guy coming out was a cool moment. I think it made for good cinematography at the end. He seemed to do an awful lot of whispering for her to just come out and go, listen. So, but they do speak in binary. So, I mean, I don't know what that equals in zeros. Maybe it is a longer message just to say, listen.
Well, one of the things that Deacon Steven says in his write-up in Decent Films is that the movie is consistent with the way that Spielberg has treated aliens in some of his other films, in particular Close Encounters and E.T. In both circumstances, there are a lot of parallels between the films, and people see this as kind of a trilogy of, and not like a direct trilogy, but a telling of the story. What I took it as is that this was a, and then I think we should talk more holistically after this, because I think this comment lends itself to that, is that Spielberg for decades now has been trying to tell this story that the world is screwed up. We need compassion and we need hope. And he uses the aliens as a device to communicate that message. That the shockingness, the shock value of there being other beings that have figured out how to be empathetic is the way to communicate that message.
Yeah, I like that.
All right. So I guess let's talk about the film holistically. So why do you think some people feel challenged by the film?
Challenge just in general.
Like why are they uncomfortable about, it seems like there is this, and I don't want to get too much into it, but last week we had that whole discussion Tuesday night when we were all together about the priest that was removed from his position in Washington D.C. for saying that
Right.
any involvement with extraterrestrials was demonic. There seems to be this uncomfortability with even discussing the possibility that other beings exist, and that somehow that's a challenge to our Christian beliefs.
Yeah, I'm not of that camp. I can see where people that are of that mindset, where they're coming from on that, and why that seems to be a challenge. It's not present for me because God is God. And God stands outside of time and space. If God saw fit to create other intelligent beings somewhere in this massive universe, then that's his prerogative. And I think what it happens is, though, is I think it leads people to a deeper question of salvation. I think that becomes the real question at hand is, okay, well, if these other beings exist, do they not need a Messiah? And if they do, who is their Messiah? And I'm of the mindset that you and I brought this up in brief conversation when we were discussing it off air, and that's that I think if there are indeed other intelligent species out there, and if they happen to require a Messiah, then their Messiah is Jesus, because God is God. He can make your Messiah whatever species he wants to. Your job is to say, yes, I believe. And if you don't, okay.
Well, I mean, I think that we find it in the title that Jesus is giving on Christ the King, the solemnity of Christ the King that starts off our liturgical year. He's Christ the King of the universe. That's the full title, not Christ the King of earth. And so I think there are at least two different views that we can have, or maybe three. One, I think the first view is Jesus died for all species. Or there's also the possibility that on whatever other planet, those creatures never fell and they continue to exist in their version of Eden.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I did a little bit of research. There are theologians that have talked about this before. There's no simple answer. We don't know. And at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters for our own personal salvation. You know, the existence of other beings does not undermine God's divinity, nor does it undermine, like, at the end of the day, if we discover tomorrow that there are aliens that exist, we still know that Jesus died to redeem us, right?
yeah, yeah.
So is there
Uh,
anything else to say about the film and the impact that it has on people and how we can have these discussions with people?
well, I think the discussions they need to be had, and I think that people who are not necessarily apologetic level, but I just think more well-rounded, well catechized individuals need to be willing to have charitable conversations in their inner circles. It's hard in the world we live in. I saw a post on a Denton Facebook page from an atheist, and that the comment section just got insane. And it just goes to show that we still live in a world where it's really, really difficult to have real dialogue with people, to have real conversations with people that aren't in your inner circle. We also live in a world where we've got Christians that are out there trying to do the right thing, but they're not doing it necessarily in the right manner. And so it becomes more off-putting and more upsetting than it does drawing people nearer to Jesus. And so I think that the conversation need to be had, but they need to be done. Just like we talk about getting involved in the government, start locally, right? You're not going to understand federal government and how the federal government works and how to properly get involved in it if you haven't started with your own city first, then build up to the county and then state, and then boom, next thing you know, you're ready for the federal level. I think same thing here. Start with people in your friends group, um, with as a Catholic with priest permission. Maybe you can have a deacon or yourself have a conversation more on a parish level, and then we can have broader conversations. And I think that there's good sources out there. I know like Jimmy Akin, apologist with Catholic Answers. I think he would be great for this, and I'd be willing to bet he's got a podcast or two out there on this topic. So I know that the big dogs, if you will, in the industry, um, there are conversations around it, but you got to hear it from your buddies and just be open to the input and bring a lot of charity to the table.
Well, one of the things that I take from this, and it's very much fitting in line with our Joe Catholic Apostolate and this podcast, and I would also say rooted in the teachings of Saint Jose Maria Escriva, is that these are opportunities for dialogue. Like, I think it's important for us to engage pop culture. This is one of the things that Mark and I were very intentional about when we first started this podcast, is that from time to time we're going to talk about pop culture because people are talking about this movie. Even non-religious people are talking about the religious aspect of it. There's an opportunity for conversation. I've got a friend of mine who's identifies as atheist. I've talked about him on air quite a bit. I know he's a sci-fi guy. I'm really looking forward to him seeing the film so I can talk to him about it because I know he's going to ask me questions. And so there's an opportunity for me to explain what we believe and how this film and what it's portraying can coexist with what our belief system is. And I think that's an opportunity for evangelization. All right. Well, speaking of evangelization, our third segment is rooted in this Sunday's reading about the harvest being plenty, but the laborers being few. And so one of the big takeaways from that, I wrote about it in this week's Joe Catholic blog post that you can find on thejoecatholic.org, is that we sometimes as Catholics, the laity, we fall into this trap of thinking that it's the job of the bishops, the pope, and the priests to do the work of evangelization when it's our job too. And we don't necessarily have to go start a formal apostolate or join a ministry or go overseas and preach to the people that have not heard the word before, but instead that we're called to evangelize in our everyday interactions. And so that's what I really want to kind of talk about now. And I want to start off with you talking a little bit about your Saturday coffees, how that came to be and what y'all do. And then after that, talk about some practical ways that we can look for opportunities to evangelize to the people in the pews and people outside the pews. So, kind of tell me a little bit about the origin story of your Saturday coffees and what happens there.
So it originated for selfish reasons, and then God saw it was good and blessed it. So there is a parish renewal program that was once called Christ Renews His Parish, and then the program was eventually bought out by Matthew Kelly and his team. What is his team called?
Dynamic Catholic.
Dynamic Catholic. So they bought it, changed the name to Welcome, and put a bunch of rules. They had a lot more control over the program to ensure that that it always stayed within the confines of church teaching, et cetera. And so again, the whole idea is it's a retreat weekend getaway. There's a men's weekend, there's a women's weekend. And after I'd done Christ Renews His Parish at my home parish, my original parish, And so when we moved to St. Jude, I wanted to, when I heard about Welcome and recognized what it was, I was like, that's how I'm going to get ingrained in this church. And this is how I'm going to make friends, because I really wanted to make friends out here. And so I went on the weekend, and what I wasn't expecting was to fall in love with all the guys that were there. There were so many men. I was like, I don't want to lose contact with you guys. I don't want to lose what we've got going this weekend. We need to keep this train rolling. So I just invited guys. I said, hey, there's this coffee shop down the street. We can meet super early one Saturday morning, so we're not disrupting your lives. What do you guys say? And men showed up. And then I just kept inviting guys, and men kept showing up. And we are almost at least 7, if not 8 years in now, doing this practically every Saturday. There are very few Saturdays that it hasn't happened. Even during the pandemic, we moved coffee to Zoom. And by the end of the pandemic, I had 2 other guys on the Zoom call with me, 2 of the older gentlemen that helped keep coffee alive. And then after all the doors were reopened, we can go back to the coffee shops like normal. We were doing that. And that's where this group me page comes about. And actually one of my buddies, Jay, he actually made me mad. We got in a little, I wouldn't call it a real scoff, but I got mad because I was being prideful about my Saturday coffee. And every group of men that had gone through the welcome week, and he basically just started inviting them to the group me page and adding them and inviting them to coffee. And I was like, but this is mine. But no, I want to do it this way. I had this envision in my head, and then God kind of smacked me around a little bit. And God was like, hey, who owns coffee? And I was like, that sounds like a trick question, Lord. He's like, I was like, is this a do you love me moment? Like, am I Peter here? What are we doing? He goes, who owns coffee? And I was like, you do? Cool. So I own coffee, yeah? And I was like, yeah. Who carried it through the pandemic? I was like, you. He's like, great. So aren't you supposed to be fishers of men? And I was like, yes, my Lord. He's like, great. Why don't you go apologize to Jay and enjoy the blessing? And I was like, oh, okay, heard. And so I just let it go. So my role is to be a goof monkey and continue to send out my wild invitations I send out and just pray and hope men show up, and they keep showing up. So that's it. And as far as what we do, we're all over the place. So I've made effort to try to include more prayer. I've made some efforts to include more theology conversations. I encourage men to bring things to the table that they're struggling with, or that they have questions about, or just something that was iron. We mentioned that exorcist that was dismissed for his videos, and we used that to prompt a dialogue. But not last week, the week before, I think is what it was. And so we have that, but a lot of us are close friends, and so there's a lot of just banter in general. I guess you could say, like we talk about with Mark, yourself, and me, that we talk from about the ridiculous to the sublime, and kind of everything in between. And I do everything I can to get guys that don't show up. There's over 100 men attached to this group me page at this point, all attached to our parish, all have been through welcome. But I average maybe, if I had to pull a number, I'd say between 8 and 10 men come on Saturday. So there's a lot of men who aren't coming, but they're paying attention to the group me page, which I had no clue about, because I just figured people were turning off their notifications, or they were there because they wanted to be present still. But I didn't think anything else of it. What a guy after mass. I'm walking down the middle of the aisle towards the back of the church. Gabriella and I were in a hurry to get somewhere. I don't remember where we were going, why we were in such a hurry, but we needed to bounce. Well, we're walking down the aisle, and this guy's like, Kevin? Question mark. And I was like, yes. I don't know this guy. I don't know who he is. Don't know his name. I've never seen him. He goes, I love your videos. And I instantly know what he's talking about. I'm like, okay, well, I got to slow my roll, because I can't just like abandon ship now.
So can
So
you
we got,
stop for a moment and explain what the videos are that he was asking or talking about?
yeah, so I do an invite every week. Sometimes it's a written invite on GroupMe, but probably at least 85% of the time, I film a short video. It could be anywhere from a minute to 2 minutes long, and it's always off the wall crazy. Sometimes I have a big skit planned out, other times I don't. But the whole idea is just to be entertaining, to be hopefully funny, and grab people's attention. And I always end it with the same way, and that's that that final invite, telling them we're having coffee, where it's at, what time it's at. I even have a little shtick that I always end it with. So, in fact, if I leave a shtick out, if I leave part of my bit out, someone was generally going to call me on it, either on group me or in person. Hey, you missed this part. You forgot this. So that's what this guy was referencing. And it was just cool. It was a really cool moment and really a blessing from God to just point out, kind of a field of dreams moment. If you build it, they will come, or he will come. Is the actual line, I do believe, in the movie. But yeah, it was just cool that and the guy was telling me I can't come to coffee because of his home life with how busy his kids are. Even as early as it is, it just he can't do it right now. But he always looks forward to my invites. And so it was just a really cool moment to just recognize that even the men who can't show up are still having fellowship, and there's still a level of evangelization that's at hand.
Yeah.
And one of my guys, Jay, he called it, I think it was Jay this past week, called it out for what it was. And then that's the fact that men recognize the need for fellowship. Men still struggle with naming their emotions and their feelings and dealing with them. And we've created this environment with God's blessing where you can do all that. We have little tiffs and group me every now and then. But you'll see men going, "Hey, man, you're so awesome. Thank you for doing this or that." Or I don't hesitate. I've told the men in several videos that I love them, and that's a very sincere statement. Even the men I don't know, I've told the men that I don't know that in the videos too. It's like I don't need to know you to know that I love you because I want the ultimate good for you. And I want you to know that your brothers that you actually do know that you're close to are there for you, but you also have the rest of us. And I think that's important. So, yeah, Saturday coffee.
Yeah. Well, Mark and I have talked about this on the podcast before is that men need to be with other men to be able to talk about guy stuff. And it's got to, it's okay if it starts off initially with sports and cars or whatnot, but that it eventually goes to some of the bigger questions. You didn't say it, but what you've described is that you've provided a safe space and place for guys to be able to be vulnerable and have those conversations. And as I've told you before, without knowing it, you have your own informal apostolate. It's been I'm very proud of you because you've taken your gift of theater, because Kevin's got a theater background, and used that in a way to be able to draw people in. My favorite video is the one that you did for Easter. I don't know if it was this year or the year before, where you had the bunny ears on and you did this over the top imitation, pretty spot on, of Bugs Bunny as the Easter Bunny. And I think that's engaging. And what you're doing is you're creating opportunities for guys to come together. And we need, you have a small men's group, whether, you call it that or not. That's what it is.
Yeah, that Easter
So
bunny. Uh-huh.
go ahead.
Yeah, that one a I made the Easter bunny a Yankee is what I did on that one. It was hey guys, it's the Easter bunny.
But I think that's consistent with the way Mel Blanc did the character, especially the early days of Bugs Bunny, old Bugs Bunny. So I think for guys out there that are listening to the podcast, this is a demonstration that there are all sorts of opportunities for apostolate. Joe Catholic started off with the idea that we were going to get to. It also was rooted in coffee. The idea of Joe was like, let's have a cup of Joe, and under the patronage of St. Joseph, we're going to get together, have some donuts, and we're going to talk a little bit about being Catholic. And you are doing the same thing informally. And what I would challenge guys out there that are watching the podcast, look for those opportunities. Years ago, we had a guy at Joe Catholic who was like, well, we need Joe Catholic to start a fitness club. No, we don't need Joe Catholic to do that. You go do that. Look for those opportunities where you feel called and gifted and do your thing. If, there are opportunities for evangelization through workouts or through other hobbies that you can, get guys involved in to be able to do these sorts of things. So I think that's the big message that comes out of this, that One of the things that was telling to me about the gospel reading from this past Sunday is it's the sending out of the disciples, sending out of the 12. But this is the first send out, not the final send out with the Great Commissioning. These guys hadn't been fully catechized yet. They didn't know what they were doing, but Jesus sent them out anyway. And I think there's something to be learned from that. We don't have to have all the answers. We just have to be Jesus to other people. We just have to be able to demonstrate how Christ has influenced our own lives and let him do the rest of the work. And beautiful things can happen, just like you described when you gave it over to the Lord and said, this is your coffee. It's not my coffee. And we get out of the way and let God do the rest. And in that way, we become fishers of men as well.
Yeah, and to catapult a little bit off one of your points, we've had little subgroups break off from this. There were bunch of guys, say a bunch. There was a handful of guys that were rucksacking before coffee for the longest time, and they continue to try to do that when they can. A lot of these guys are really busy. They're husbands, they're fathers, so things happen, but they try to do that. I've got a comedy trope. There's probably 4 to 6 guys that I call upon anytime I want to go see a theater show or go watch comedy. We've seen the Spree Tape Layers together. We've seen Whose Line Is It Anyways live. I can't remember what they call that, what their actual show was, that they're kind of touring with, and a handful of comedians. And there's another very clean comic coming to Plano that I'm really, really hoping I can go see. One of my favorites. And I keep hitting my guys up. And so, and I know there's some other things. Some guys are into cars, but a lot of these men wouldn't have connected as easily had they not been tied into the parish line. In this particular case, it's through Welcome. But yeah, I really enjoy the intimacy aspect. There are guys that some guys, mainly guys that from a cultural standpoint aren't huggers. Some men just aren't huggers in general. But most of the guys I'm close to, if I don't give them a hug, if they end up with just a handshake, I'm hearing about it. Like, they're not happy. It's like, what is this? I thought we were closer than that. And it's great. And we had banter today. Just today, I was trying to get ready for us to do this podcast, but there was a lot of back and forth on a side text group that's going on, and I created this cool AI image. Well, somebody decided it'd be cute to take that same image and put me in like a Daisy Duke outfit just for giggles. And so I responded with a different one, made myself basically a different woman just for, again, giggles, put it out there, knowing the array of crazy responses I was going to get from these guys. And it just set off this chain of just entertainment. And it was, I don't know, it's fun. It's awesome. It carries over in the fun and stuff that I have with these guys. Because I spend so much time with them, even if it's just through the phone a lot of times, it bleeds over into other aspects of my life. Because one of the guys was like, hey, if my daughter and wife kind of look down next time they see you, that's because they saw this picture. And I'm like, all it's going to do is make me just dole it out on a different level. I'll put a little strut on next time I see him just to get a laugh, because I have no shame when it comes to those things. But then things like talking to my guys at work who know my faith. My boss he's got faith in the Lord, so there's some good talks there. His father recently passed away, so that was another opportunity for me to, if nothing else, just say, hey, I'm praying for you and praying for your father. We don't always see eye to eye on some of that stuff because of his particular faith, but there's enough shared ground there that it means a lot to him.
Well, what I want to say as we get ready to close out is that one of the things that has stood out for me is that with what you're doing, using your normal, natural gift of comedy and theater, is that grace builds upon nature. And you've taken your gift of theatrics and allowed the Lord to put his grace upon that, to use it for good. And that's what we all need to do. We all have our normal, natural talents. And if we open ourselves to the Holy Spirit, bringing the grace upon us, we'll use that. So I guess the message I want to send out as we talk about the harvest being plenty, but the laborers are few, step into it and be open to the Holy Spirit using you as an instrument to draw other men into the faith. And once you open your eyes to that, things will start happening. So, in your daily prayer life, just say, Lord, what is it that you want me to do? And just like Kevin heard it point blank about the coffee, you'll hear it too, and what it is that God wants you to do. And it may not be something formal, it may be something informal like the coffee, but I promise you that fruits will be born from it. And the fact that Kevin still has guys coming back week after week is a demonstration that fruits are being born. All right. So this week, go to prayer, open yourself up to the Holy Spirit, ask the Holy Spirit to guide you in what He wants you to do, and then do it because He's calling you to help with the harvest. All right. As always, we say, smoke them if you got them. Good night.
Good night.